Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Time for the Writestream. We're going to do a little live writing today too as well. What I'm going to talk about today is story length, and that is because of all the questions I get on this channel. The question of how long a story should be is like definitely one of the top 5, right? Like, how long should my book be? I've gotten that question more times than I can really count, which is fine because people want to know some of the in and outs of the industry. So when we talk about story length and book length, I'm going to talk about screenplays and stuff as well. When we talk about these things, what you have to keep in mind is that these are industry standards for if you are basically giving your story to another person to make, or you're making it in a standardized format. So the answer to the question, how long should my book be? The answer is however long it needs to be to tell the story, and hopefully no longer, meaning you're not going to add things in that aren't part of the story. That's a mistake a lot of new writers make, is they just write more things than they need to. They put more in the book than the book really needs to have in order to function and be enjoyable for a reader, regardless of how long you happen to be shooting for. Industry desires and standards for how long a book should be have changed a lot over the years, so we'll cover a lot of different possible options. The great thing about being independent, especially, is that the story really can be however long you need it to be, and the length, like the maximum length if you are publishing independently, is really a matter of how thick a book the printer is willing to print and how small you're willing to make the font in order to get the book into people's hands if you're doing a physical book. But I guess you could technically make an ebook however long you needed it to be. So there are practical upper limits, in which case you would have to volumize your work, like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, rather than one giant door stopper kind of book. But most people are more concerned with getting the story to be the correct length for it to be a book, right? They're just wanting to know all the specifics for how the industry works. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that today, and give you all the tips and guidelines for what you might need to know if you're going to be submitting your story for a magazine, or you're looking to write a story that could be published in magazines, or you're looking to publish independently and some of the business things that might go into that, or if you're looking to publish, quote, traditionally, where you would find an agent and blah, blah, blah. Do all of that stuff to get someone else to publish a book. So I want to reiterate, stories vary in length depending on what the story is and how much story there is to be told. However, a professional writer can change the length of the story, how long it ends up being in a physical format or something like that. They can alter that, and they will alter it by changing the style in which they write, as well as, this is more importantly, the content of what is in the story, right? Putting more subplots into a book makes it longer and longer and longer, and taking plot points out of a book will make it shorter and shorter and shorter, to where you get the story to the correct length to publish it in the format that you're looking to publish it in. Since I do most of my stuff independently, I have books that are a whole bunch of different lengths, right? Like, this is a fairly long book. It's 120,000 words. There are plenty of longer books on the market, but once it starts getting longer than that, once it gets up to like 200,000, you start running into issues of like formatting and things like that, where for print on demand applications, you can only make a book so thick, all the way down to rather thin books like this that's only about 20,000 words, technically what people will call a novella length. And I'll talk about some of those definitions, which are really industry shorthand. Something in the middle between like a novella and a short novel, up to something that is really novel length. This is the traditional length of a novel, about 50 to 60,000 words. I think that's about 60,000 words. Here's a friend of mine's book, about 50,000 words. Good size for a paperback, right? An 8x5 paperback feels really good at 50,000 words. my creative manual's somewhere in the 35,000 words, so somewhere between there. I tried to keep it really short and not longer than it needs to be. With nonfiction, it's really easy to overwrite, in my opinion. That is to write way more crap than you actually need to write to communicate what you're trying to communicate. Really, really common thing with nonfiction. It's why you get a big here. I was like, what was the book? Atomic Habits. My sister gave me this book, Atomic Habits. It's not a bad book. It's just a bookized version of a guy's like podcast, and it's like this thick. It needed to be like a pamphlet. Like you could get all the information in a blog post. You really could. So like that's the thing about stuff like that. And when I was writing this book on your process and habits and things like that, I was like, I need to not write more than it's necessary. Let me give you the concept, give you some ways to execute it, show you some examples for how you can execute it, and then get the heck out of the way, right? I don't need to spend all day worrying, coming up with a million different ways to express the same thing. You need to be more efficient than that. I respect your time more than that. A little bit. There we go. It gives me a little bit of a more tan appearance. Not quite as ghostly like this. Anyway. So let's start with a couple of industry shorthands for the length of your story. We're going to start with books and then we'll deal with screenplays later. Okay. Actually, before I get that, got someone in the chat already. Do you ever start a rough draft and realize it's going to be way too long? I feel like it takes 30,000 just to get a story going. Not these days. Certainly when I was newer, yes. It's really easy to miscalculate how long a story will be because there's many variables that can increase the length of the story. The more characters you have, the longer it is. The more plot points you have, the longer it is. The more conflicts you have, ABC story, the longer it's going to be. The more subplots you have, that increases the length. So how do you control that? Well, you cut out some of those things, and that will keep the length down. So let me give you a couple of shorthands for length. There's flash fiction. Flash fiction is like 1,000 words. Okay, 2 pages, single spaced. 2 pages, single spaced, 12 point Times New Roman font, on an 8.5 by 11 sheet with half-inch indentations and 1-inch margins. That's the manuscript formatting that I do most of my drafting in because every page is 500 words. Very easy to figure it out. I'm doing word count, by the way, so maybe I should do a quick digression into why writers use word count. I'll show you why writers use word count. Where is it? Okay. Maybe this one has it. Okay. All right. Here's the Krampus Christmas collection from 2020. Here's Muramasa Blood Drinker. Now, if you bought Krampus Christmas, Muramasa Blood Drinker is inside Krampus Christmas. Okay? How many pages is Muramasa Blood Drinker? It is 493 pages. 493 page book. Cool. How long is it in this nice 8.5 by 11 format? It's not 493 pages, I'll tell you that much. Let's see. It starts on page... Is it at the end? Yeah, okay. Act 1. I ran right past it. I really had such a good time writing Muramasa. It was such a fun book to read. All right. It's a big chunk. It's a big chunk of this collection, of this anthology I put out. What's great is that once you write a lot of books, you can put out anthologies of your own books. It's like, yeah, it's an anthology that has 10 books in it. You know? It is 324 or 325 minus 148. Pull my calculator. I don't want to do arithmetic. Live, that's embarrassing if I mess up. 325 minus 148. So it's 177 pages. So did I write a 177 page book? Or did I write a 500-page book, 493-page book? Which one? So people who aren't writers, they think in terms of pages, but writers, we think in terms of words, like thousands of words, hundreds of words, that kind of stuff. And the reason is because the format that you're publishing it in will change the number of pages that your story takes up. If you're publishing in a magazine, like Kirsova or something like that, then the magazine will be fewer pages than if you were to publish it on your own, in your own book, or as a book on its own. Okay, so everything we're doing by word count, because the pages that come out at the end are going to be totally different than if you are, depending on what format you're publishing in. And in fact, there's another version of the physical version of Muramasa that's fewer pages. It's like 400 pages, or like 390 pages instead of 490, because I increased the size of the page. So the bigger the page, the more words you can fit on it, and the fewer pages it is. Ideally, you want as few pages as possible for your story, because you make more money that way, right? So if you're publishing a magazine, you want to fit as much as you can into that magazine, make that magazine as few pages as possible, so that it costs as little money as possible to print the magazine, and you can sell it competitively at a competitive price and make as big a profit as you can. I mostly use the 8.5 format, or I'm sorry, 8x5 format. Not 8.5 by 11. 8.5 by 11 for anthologies. 8x5 for most things, because it's just a good size for a book, right? It's just a good size. I like the 8x5 size. I use 6x9 for longer books or collections that aren't in like the anthology territory where there's like 500,000 words worth of stuff in there. So once I cross the border of like 300,000 words for an anthology, right, then it's got to be 8.5 by 11. Or if I'm just publishing a magazine, like with the Corona-chan anthology, that one wasn't, that one's only like this thick, only like 120, maybe 200 pages. But I really packed the words in there so that we could sell it cheap. I think you'd still buy it for like $8 or something, which is great for how many stories that are in it. There's whole books in it. I recently finished the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, over 60 hours of audiobook, and in the end, it was surprising how little had happened. Yeah, I kind of feel that way about his writing. I feel that way about a lot of modern writers. They don't get edited down to be tight, and that has a lot to do with some other things in the industry we can talk about. So let's talk about some book links. So flash fiction, that's like 1,000 words. Short story length is going to be anything above that up to maybe 10,000 words. Magazines have different desires for how long a story they want you to submit. Usually not more than 7,000. Unless you have like a relationship with the publisher and they're doing a serial, or they're really wanting to feature something that's like 10, 12,000 words. Magazines back in the day used to publish longer stuff within them and entire novels as part of the magazine. It's not as common today. So 5,000 words is going to be your usual target for, quote, a short story. If you do not read a lot of short fiction, you need to read short fiction before you start writing short fiction, because you won't have a good feel for how great short fiction writers execute their style and their stories correctly to hit that 5,000 word mark. If you're reading someone like Robert E. Howard, it's remarkable how much he can pack into 5,000 words. Whereas if you're reading a lot of modern writers, they can write, if you're reading like a Robert Jordan book, he could spend the first 5,000 words of a book telling you literally nothing important. Nothing, like you could have skipped them. And I've done this. I remember reading, I think it was Winter's Heart, maybe, or maybe Path of Daggers. The first 10,000 words was like Shinarans and Aes Sedai humping at each other and saying nothing and revealing nothing. It was just like a 10,000 words of mood of stuff like that. So like, could have been cut. Right. You couldn't get away with that style of writing if you were trying to write for a magazine. It just wouldn't fly. You'd get your story rejected. George Barrett says, "Oh yes, the 21st here now, so close enough. Merry Christmas." Oh, we might be in Europe there. Well, Merry Christmas to you guys. I was just talking to my son today about St. Nicholas and how he slapped Arius, supposedly. I feel like so many of our traditions, we lose track of kind of the heart of them. Like Santa Claus, we have a Santa Claus that's really so different from who St. Nicholas was. St. Nicholas was this zealot, like on fire for Christ, and a bishop, so an important guy. Not a guy who just was known for delivering parents, not some guy in the woods, but like a really important, high-ranking member of the church who met with the emperor and everything. So he's the Bishop of Myrna. I have a friend in Czechia, in the Czech Republic, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we have this tradition of eating a carp on Christmas Eve." Sorry for this digression. I just was thinking about how cool some other traditions are. It's like we put the carp in the bathtub. They keep the fish alive in the bathtub, and then they kill it on Christmas Eve and eat it. So it's like really fresh, and it's this tradition of eating fish on Christmas Eve. And it's like, well, what's that from? It's well, like, Christ ate fish, and he ate fish with his disciples after he was resurrected. That's actually an important detail in the Bible, is that he grills fish and eats it after the resurrection, indicating that his body was in fact a body and operated as a body. He consumed food. Important details, right? Anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody. Merry Christmas, Sound Engraver. Thank you for stopping by. Okay. So yes, flash fiction, 1,000 or less. Short story, 5,000 is your target. You can go up to 7,000, sometimes up to 10,000. Once you get to 10,000, you're in the novelette territory. Once you get to 20,000, or let's say 15,000, you're really in the novella territory. 20,000 is about what a novella is. And I actually spent a number of years trying to perfect that format. It's a format I really loved from the first half of the 20th century that appears in a lot of magazines. H.P. Lovecraft wrote a lot of stories that were that length, 20,000 words, as did Robert E. Howard, two of my favorite writers from the first half of the 20th century. But there's lots of others. You can read lots of other pulp era stuff that has mostly been forgotten at this point, and you could probably read for free from guys like Walter B. Gibson, that is going to be in that target area and be really awesome for that area. Once you get above novella, it's all kind of fluid until you get to about 50,000 words. And that was the traditional 50 to 60,000 words was the traditional length for a genre novel in the 20th century. So if you're picking up stuff by Michael Moorcock, if you're picking up stuff by Poul Anderson, if you're picking up stuff by Robert Heinlein, or any of the classic sci-fi writers, you're going to find a book that's much thinner than most books today. Fahrenheit 451 is like 50,000 words, right? I think 1984 is around 50 or 60,000 words. To Kill a Mockingbird is in that same area, right? So the 20th century novel format was 50 to 60,000 words, about this thick. I'll give you two purple books. We're into purple today, right? J.D. Cowan's White Signal. Sorry, I'm getting my microphone in the way. Y Signal, right? These are about 50,000 words. About a half-inch thick, It's a good size. It's a really good size for a story. 50,000 words is short enough you can sit down and read it in a day if you want to and have a great time, or for a couple hours, right? The 20,000 word book is what I call a 2-hour book. In 20,000 words, you can read this story in roughly about 2 hours, about as long as it takes to watch a movie. And that's why I targeted 20,000 words for a lot of stories, is that I knew readers are short on time. I know they don't have a lot of time to pour through a book and digest it. I want to give them the story in a reasonable amount of time. So for me, 20,000 words is a great amount. That's the same amount of time that they would spend watching a movie. So if you pick up Voices of the Void, that was actually part of my marketing strategy for the book, was that it was like a movie. It was like watching a sci-fi movie. I called it like Lovecraft meets aliens, and I targeted people who like movies. And yeah, a lot of people were able to read it in 2 hours and have an enjoyable experience and leave a review and all that kind of stuff. They feel like they get more value out of the 2-hour book than out of some big doorstopper that's a chore to read. You never want people to be bored. So it's a lot harder to bore people in 20,000 words than it is. It's possible. It's absolutely possible, but it's harder to bore people in 20,000 words than 100,000 words. The 100,000 word book is something that is a late 20th century kind of paradigm. to where by the 2000s, you couldn't even get, like if you wrote a fantasy book, it wasn't going to be published unless it was well over 100,000 words. That's just the length that ended up being kind of standard in genre fiction at that time. I'm not sure why it ended up that way, if it was like paper monopoly or something weird, but that's what it ended up being. But I think most likely it was just the overall trends of the genres. Robert Jordan was very popular in the 90s and 2000s. So that means that everybody else that you publish has to be somewhat like Robert Jordan. You have to have links that are somewhere in the territory of his books. Likewise, Lord of the Rings had been consistently popular for a long time. Each book in Lord of the Rings is fairly long, so that means you need to write a long fantasy book if you want to get it published, which is totally different from stuff from the 60s, which was in the 50,000 words or less range. And in fact, if you read some of the Elric books by Michael Moorcock, they are in fact 4 novellas pasted together into a large narrative. This is Sailor on the Seas of Fate as an example. It's 4 just different short stories he published, novellas he published in magazines, just stuck into a novel and put on the shelf in the fantasy section as a way to give readers what they wanted, which was Elric stories, without having to go find like back catalogs of magazines and stuff like that. Overall, I support that. This is true of most of the Fritz Leiber stuff, the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Most of these are just novellas pasted together, 4 different stories packaged as one novel. They aren't really a novel when you buy it. It's 4 novellas squished together, and that's fine. That's fine. So just so you know, the 20,000 word size, the novella size, that was a 20th century size that I think is really ideal for adventure stories. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you're wanting to trad publish like a sci-fi or fantasy novel, you got to hit 100,000. Problem is hitting 100,000 and keeping the story super interesting. I think my next book I put out will be somewhere in the neighborhood, I don't remember how long it is, 150,000 words. It might actually be more than that. It's fairly long, right? It's a long book. There's a lot of characters and a lot of plot. There are 2 protagonists, 2 people doing serious protagging, and a third that kind of shows up, right? And then there's lots of different plot points to get all the characters arranged and moving in different places and fulfilling their goals and resolving the conflicts, many different layers of conflict in satisfying ways. It just adds length to the story. So the more of that you add, the longer it's going to be. So if you're writing a 100,000 word book, you really need to think of like ABC story. There needs to be a strong central conflict. You need to have a romance in the story, and then you need like some tertiary thing like best friend plot that will be able to pull the whole thing together for 100,000 words. Basically just copy Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling really knows how to format a book to get all the subplots banging and resolving in the right way. And so you want to do that. It's kind of like TV writing, an ABC story. It'll come together really well. Let me take a look at the chat a little bit. Finishing up the last book of Asimov's Foundation series. I have to say, for all the good he's written, he could have pared his last story down to half the size it is. Love short stories. Yeah, 20,000 words is a great goal. I wrote a short story last spring at 5,700. That's an excellent length. The pace feels good. And the next may be the same. And I'll talk about some ways to save some words. I'd love to see short story novella reemergence in our culture. I think people would read more fiction that way. I think so too, which is why I emphasized that format, and especially with indie fiction. That format is almost there. Almost, but not quite. Because what happens is people gravitate towards the business zeitgeist. Like whatever paradigm gets established for how to make money, you can guess people are going to flood into that. And unfortunately, that is not short, compact stories that are enjoyable to read and entertain you and then are gone. That is writing very long series of books this long or shorter. So sort of, right? Like you'd write, instead of writing a 20,000 word book, you'd write a 30,000 word book and make it 20 books long. So you'd write 20 30,000 word books instead of writing a 500,000 word book. You'd write 20 of those 30,000 word books, and that's how you're going to make money, because you sell each one for $2.99 or $5.99. Sell the first one for free or 99 cents. Second one is $2.99. Like, I'm just telling you the standard business strategy that emerged in the 2010s and is not really working now, but I'll tell it to you anyway because it's part of the discussion of today. Is you write the first book and you make the first book really good. You want your book one to be like the best. Drop all your money in book one. Have a $1,000 cover. Hire an editor for $1,000. Make the book the best possible book it can be, but leave it on a cliffhanger and then don't resolve it for another 20 books. You give that one away or you sell it for 99 cents. Obviously, you'll get more people to download if you give it away. Book two is whatever the next price point at, 99 cents, $2.99. Book three on, you sell them for $4.99 a pop. And you sell them for $4.99 a pop all the way until you get to book 20. And at book 20, your goal here is to get someone to read book one. And by the time you get to book 20, the quality of the book almost doesn't matter. People are so invested in what they're there for that they're going to get to the end of the series and read it. And this is not just indie. This is like the indie way to make money. Personally, I hate that, right? I hate it as a reader, and I really hate it as a writer. But that's what people gravitate towards are those 20 book long series. And then you spend all your ad money on book one. You spend a bunch of money on book one. People buy book one and then you make up the cost. Like you sell at a loss on book one so that people will buy book 20 and you'll have made a profit by that point. I don't see this working a whole lot right now. And you kind of catch little glimpses of people that are like, basically, the ebook market collapsed like I said it would. I said the ebook market would collapse back in 2020. And it did. Now, the audiobook market collapsed first, but the ebook market, it started going down. The algorithm wasn't working. You had to start spending more and more money to get your book noticed. And then AI writing hit, and now nobody can find your book on Amazon. So the Amazon sales strategy is dead. Book marketing is dead, right? So what do you replace it with? Well, you replace it with other paradigms, neo-patronage, person-to-person, selling your book at conventions. People are gonna find new ways to figure out how to be successful at this. I guarantee it. But that model is fading away as we knew it would. That was an exploit of a market circumstance that was temporary. And once it goes away, you can't continue to use that exploit. But that's how people wrote. So yeah, the 30,000 word book kind of came back as part of a 20 book long series, but that's not what people really want. People want to read H.P. Lovecraft where they get to the end of the book and they're like, oh man, that was cool. I want to read more from that author. Continuing this digression, I'm sorry if it's too long a digression. Marketing changed significantly with Amazon after 2010, and it changed because of my shitty generation, Gen Y. I'm blaming it on me and people like me. We got trained to think of franchises as a thing rather than creators. Okay? Rather than authors. So whereas baby boomers would say, I like reading Stephen King, millennials would say, I like reading Spider-Man. Spider-Man's like a whole... What do you mean? Who's Spider-Man? Steve Lee's... I'm sorry. Not Steve Ditko's Spider-Man and Stan Lee's Spider-Man? Or are you talking about like Seth MacFarlane? Are you talking about Eric Larson? Who's Spider-Man are we talking about that you like to read, right? So we become attached to the characters. So now all the marketing is about the microgenre and the characters and the title and the tropes that are in it. It's basically like AI writing. That's why it's like AI writing. Like people are already being automatons towards a robot. They are already acting in a robotic fashion by targeting a microgenre and writing the tropes in there and making the ads in a specific way to show to people that, it's like you're treating everything like you're the robot. Like, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but like you're the robot and the operator is Amazon. It's like, what? Yeah, you're the robot and the operator's YouTube. You're a robot. You're working for robots and they're having you do robotic things. That was the whole point of working for robots. So yeah, I'm not concerned about AI because I've never bought into that paradigm where I can be threatened by AI. My stuff is a product of me. It's not about the tropes that are in it. It's not about half the crap that I talk about, right? It's not about any of that stuff. It's about what I have to say. Same thing with my music. It's like, oh, could you program an AI to like make ambient sounds like I make? It's like, yeah, but it won't solo the way I solo. It won't think about how I'm being repetitive and I need to do something different. It won't do any of the things that I do. It's incapable of replicating me in a sense that maintains my identity. It can make sounds similar to me. Why not? You know, I'm sure it'll get there. I used to program. I used computer music to program, have the computer perform music, right? This was 20 years old. None of this stuff's new. It's old. It's old. You know, it's the same thing with like, buy my trash taped to the wall. I'm like, this is from the 50s. Can we think of any new rebellious art? No, we can't, because there's no more art to rebel against. What's up, Adrian? Glad to have been able to catch your streaming. Thanks for stopping by. Since I started working a second job, I haven't been able to listen to it live. I hope that second job is earning you some economic rewards, though. It's good to have economic rewards, especially if you're able to use them wisely when you're young. You know, I was so broke through like my 20s. It's stupid, you know, and now I'm like 40 and it's like, I got to work twice as hard because I wasn't working my ass off in my 20s. I actually was working my ass off, but I just wasn't being very like economically productive, especially after 2008. I made a lot of money as a musician, and then 2008 happened and we went into a Great Depression that no one wants to talk about because you'd blame it on Obama, right? But the truth is that the legislature and the administration of that time, and George W. Bush was part of this as well, absolutely collapsed the economy. So I went from being able to gig like 4 nights a week to 0 gigs. Restaurants closed down. There was no more live music, so that was like the only way left to make money in music. You couldn't record music and make money in the 2000s because Napster had happened. There was no money in music. The only way to make money was to tour if you were in like a rock band, or to play like lots of live gigs if you were a classical musician like me. I did the latter because, frankly, there was a lot more money in it. I only had to split it one way. But once the economy collapsed, there's nothing for it. You know, it's like spent years being broke and kind of cobbling together a living to continue on to the next month because there was just like no way to get economically ahead for like 5 years. You know, even teaching and doing stuff like that. It wasn't until like I went. That's one of the reasons I became a public school teacher, is that it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, believe it or not, and it wasn't nearly as much work as teachers like to lead on if you know what you're doing. And since I'd been a university professor ahead of that, I had a good idea what to do as a public school teacher. Anyway, and thank you for the super chat. I just missed this. Thank you. Make the first book really good. Yeah. If you're writing a series, all of it is, if that first book is good enough, it doesn't matter how bad the last one is. People read it. People read through all of those crappy Robert Jordan books, right? Like if you're reading Wheel of Time, it's like, wow, that first book is good. Second book, wow, it's really good. Second book's better than the first book. Third book, yeah, it's pretty good. Fourth book, still good. Fifth book, it's okay. Sixth book, it's okay. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll pick up, and seventh book will be the end of the series. 7, 8, 9, 10, unreadable. These books are so bad. They're some of the worst fantasy books I've ever read. You go from a great to the worst. Then I think it gets like slightly better at 11. Then Robert Jordan dies and Brandon Sanderson writes 3 good books to finish off the series. And that's Wheel of Time. So, but people will read still. They'll pick up Wheel of Time, and those first couple books are so good that they will read all the way to the end of book 13. And if I take a step back, talk about book length, take a step back. The reason that those middle books suck is they're too long. They're too long for what's in them. There's no plot resolution. We don't have a meaningful conflict that's in our face, and we're not having events that are pushing us towards a resolution of that conflict. And it's partly because we have too many characters. We're like doing this character, and that it's Matt, and then it's Perrin, and then it's Rand, and then it's Nynaeve, which everyone hates, and then it's you're just switching between all these characters, and the story gets drowned out in all of that. You just lose. It's like, what are they doing? Well, I don't know what they're even attempting to do. I remember stopping like halfway through, I think, book 8, and I was just like, I don't know what any of these characters are trying to do right now. They're trying to find a bowl. What are they doing, right? I don't even know anymore. And it's because those books are too long. If you took all 4 of those books and you condensed them into one book, cut out all the crap, and maybe eliminated in some of those goals which don't matter for the resolution. And that's the thing, is like you get to the end of book 13 and you're like, or is it book 14? I don't even remember how many books are in this freaking series. You get to the end of the last book and you're like, well, half the crap that they didn't even matter. It just had no impact on the finality of what they were doing at all. The entire series, which was 14 books, could have been 7 and would have been way better for it. And that's something very positive I can say about Stephen King's Dark Tower series is it ends after 7 books. And I don't feel like any of the books are too long. I can take umbrage at the way he ended the book. I can be like, it's not, I wish he would have fought Flag. But he still told the story, and he got to the end, and the book ended. There was, yes, he put Harry Potter shit in his last 3 books for some reason. Doesn't matter, because he was able to keep those stories interesting, and the characters were in a, it's hard to say literal because they don't exist, right? But they are physically in the imaginary space, at least, moving closer to the goal of the Dark Tower. They are walking towards the goal with each book, and then eventually they get there. Compared to Robert Jordan, Stephen King knocks it out of the freaking park as far as his pacing goes. And this is a guy known for writing books that are too long. Dark Tower is actually... So Dark Tower has some of my favorite fantasy books of all time. It also has like some of my least favorite. So it's like book 1 is probably top 5 fantasy novels for me. The Gunslinger. It's really good. Book 2, bottom 5. Book 3, top 20, maybe top 50. Book 3 is really good. Book 4, trash. Book 5, okay. Book 6, trash. Book 7, okay. It's like every other book is just, I hate it. But then every other book, I also really like it. So that's Dark Tower. Overall, I would recommend Dark Tower, actually. And now that I think about it, it's a great series to read. It's so, because he's a horror writer and he was doing whatever he wanted to do, he's just not bound by any of the fantasy tropes that I find annoying, right? He's not writing hard in the genre. He's just writing stories that he thinks are cool about characters that he likes. And there's sort of an extended universe that you can read into if you've read The Stand or Insomnia or any of those other books, which I think are good. I think are good books. But make the subsequent books just as good. Sorry, I didn't read your follow-up after the super chat. Same goes for the film sector. For some consuming a great deal of material, the shorter hour and a half films are far more satisfying. Well-executed quality content, of course. That was the industry standard for years and years, and honestly, it's still the industry standard, unless you're doing a high-concept superhero film or something, in which case they want a 2.5-hour film. I got the second job to help me pay off my debts. Get rid of those debts, brother. You got to get rid of them. Don't give me $10. Pay off debts, dude. I appreciate the super chat, though. Adrian gave me $10. I'm gonna PayPal you $20 or something. Okay. The first book of the Isekai Portal fantasy novel I'm working on is going to be around 200,000 words. Though in reality, it's 2 books that I'll be releasing as one when I start publishing it. I might cut that down. Just practical advice, especially if you're writing isekai novels, 50K. Split that bad boy up into 4 books. Trust me, no one will care that there's not a strong story. Just try to get as good a resolution as you can at the end of book 1. Isekai novels, it's all about this series. People love these light novel series. 50K, that's the standard in Japan. So I take that 200,000 words, I break it up into 4 books and do what I was talking about. Make the first one fairly cheap, and then just up the price a little bit for the other ones to make up the difference. So the first one's 99 cents. The next three are 99 cents, $2.99, $4.99. People are so happy to pay even $10 for an isekai novel, and then they're super easy to format, man. They come out like the perfect size. The Amazon's 8.5 is like super, or 8x5 is super close to like light novel format. I don't have any in the room where I go like it, but I have some tankobons. All right, here's a tankobon. Delicious in Dungeon. I love Delicious in Dungeon. I heard they're making an anime, which is great. So here's the you can see tankobon is very slightly larger than the Amazon 8x5. Just a little bit. You can see it poking out from the back there. Just a little bit bigger. About just a half-inch wider. You don't need to do a custom size, but 8.5, it'll feel like a Japanese light novel. It's pretty close to the tankobon size. And Amazon might actually have just the tankobon size as one of the sizes. It's very slightly taller too. Just a hair taller. There we go. Boom, there it is. Yeah. I love that the 8x5 size that not just Amazon, but like every POD publisher will do. It's a really good size for books. It just feels good. The books look the right size. They look like a book. They look like they're a good story length when you pick them up. 08 to 09, that was when I also stopped finding enough work as stonemason's apprentice. Influx of immigrants, which the masters could hire for 3 for the price of 1 me. Now, I would say this is a weird thing. I don't want to get like too political here, but we actually in the United States are paying the price for some of those decisions now. Is that construction made prior to about the year 2000 is generally of higher quality than construction made after 2000, even though the materials of the newer stuff might be better. Like you go into a house made in 2010 and it's got like granite countertops and the floors look nice. The manufactured floors are nicer than they were in 1991. The counters are nicer than they were in 1991, right? The cabinets might even be nicer. But you start looking inside of things. Like I remember at my last house, which was made in the 2000s, it's like I went to go like put in light switches and like the wiring was not done correctly, and not in a way that it would be dangerous, but it's like you have a master electrician and there's like you expect a certain number of twists with like the wires, and in this one it's done a little bit weird because I'm used to like California code for how things are wired. So like they'll put like 3 hots, like 1 hot going to 3 different like circuits, which is a little weird, like in one box. But everything is like, big wire nuts. Everything's done correctly. Nothing's shoved in there. There's nothing kind of half-assed about anything that's going on in my house. My house was made in like 1991. I had a house before this that was in like my first house my wife and I lived in, which was made in 1974 and was actually really good construction. And if you get old enough construction, you even get better materials where you get real 2x6s, not 1 3/4 by like 5s or whatever they have. They had bigger boards and stuff back then too. But anyway, my point is that they started hiring cheaper labor to, save money. And when you're doing a lot of subcontracting, what you do is like you have a contractor that builds a house, you hire a guy to do electrical work, for instance. And it's up to him to hire apprentices. And so his apprentices may be really bad, or they may be immigrants who will just work for cheaper than like a regular person would, maybe even day laborers, depending on what you're doing. So you may end up with like weird cut corners you wouldn't think about when it comes to like, lots of things that you do in a house. So where there's like a sweet spot about, maybe 2000 and before, where there's not as much immigrant labor and they aren't cutting as many corners with the labor. It's just a little bit better quality. I have like plastered walls and all kinds of weird stuff that's really good, honestly. So anyway, yeah, just a little diatribe there. And it really has to do with experience, training, stuff like that, you're paying less and you're also getting less usually. It's not like you're getting a deal. We're going to exploit the fact that the Mexican can't get a better job by paying him less. Yes, but he also doesn't have the same kind of experience or care towards the job that a real apprentice making $15 an hour or $25 an hour, if he's getting to a journeyman level or something, would actually want to charge. So you pay less and you also get less. That's the truth. You find weird little things with a lot of modern construction where it's like, yeah, this faucet is good. It's better than the 1991 faucets, but it's installed incorrectly. It's because the plumber wasn't hiring a real apprentice. He was just using day laborers to put stuff in. That kind of stuff. Anyway. There's nothing to say those immigrants can't become good workers, but when they do, they start asking for more money, and then you want to go hire more day laborers to do stuff. Oh, we're just going to screw up some drywall. We'll hire some day laborers who've maybe done some drywall. That's how a lot of work gets done around here now. And I think a lot of construction companies would have a hard time if they weren't relying on that cheap foreign labor, like exploiting that labor to come up with a lower bottom line, because those workers have less options. And but you, like I said, you pay less, you also get less. Sorry. The Southern Gothic horror book Wicker's Boy by Mike Duran, essentially a short story. It's only 62 pages and has large print, but it's excellent. Yeah, there's so many good ones. All right, so let's talk about, let me finish the chat and I'll talk about how you target these links. Let's talk about how you target some of these book links, because I could talk forever about random crap. Gen Z Val. Oh yeah, Adrian. I think I'll take that advice. Once the first draft is done for book one, I'll see how I can apply your advice and if I can still tell the story I want to tell by doing so. You almost certainly can. In fact, if you are applying the strategy I'm talking about, you actually don't want the book to end. You want it to end on a cliffhanger. So you cut it at a cliffhanger where like someone has to buy the next book in the series to figure out how things are going to go, and that's how you end up selling the book. It seems, it's just it's a marketing strategy, like many things. Okay. In my case, I've read so many short stories that it's harder for me to figure out how to write a novel than a short story. Well, we'll attack it from both ends then. So let's talk about writing a short story. So the essential components of a story: setting, characters, plot. If you want to get your story to function at 5,000 words, you need a conflict and you need a resolution. 5,000 words is enough words for you to have a character, to introduce and talk about that character and reveal some things about that character, have that character encounter a conflict, which is a problem that they must solve, to come up with a solution to solve the problem, and then solve it. So if we look at, let's look at one that I actually analyzed on the channel, just so people can go look at the analysis and listen to the audiobook. It is Skulls in the Stars by Robert E. Howard. This is a Solomon Kane book. I said it was the first one. I guess I was incorrect. I think it might have been, I'm not sure if it's the first one he wrote or the first one he published. Right? There's two. And one he wrote before the other but published after the other. I don't remember all the details. Anyway, it's like the second one. It's the second Solomon Kane story. So you meet Solomon Kane, then you immediately have a conflict. You're going to this town. Oh, there's a monster on the road. You should really wait until tomorrow. Well, Solomon Kane's like, well, this is a monster, Well, being a holy warrior, right? I'm going to try to solve this problem. How do I solve the problem? You go over there. There's a little fight. He fights the monster. Next day, he presents the solution. What's the solution? What really happened? Oh, it turns out that this was like a ghost because of this betrayal over here. You reveal it for everyone, then you have a conclusion where you execute the bad guy, the real bad guy. So there's a surprise ending, a surprise resolution to the conflict. And it happens in about 5,000 words. Perfectly for what's there. Actually, I think it's actually shorter. It might be 2,500 words. So for short stories, you want a conflict, a resolution, and a main character. You can have an antagonist, but you don't want to pile on too many more characters than that. If your main cast of characters is exceeding 4, you probably have too many characters for a short story. Just saying. So how many characters were there in Voices of the Void, which was 20,000 words? There were 2 characters. 2. And then there was a lot of mood and some little steps to get to the end of the story. So typical short story, if we're going to think of like a detective story, it's really easy to write a 5,000 word detective story. Think of your most generic detective story. Hot blonde comes into the private detective's office, tells him she has a problem. He agrees to solve the problem. He does some investigating. He figures out she lied to him about some part of the problem. He confronts her about it, and then they come up with the real solution to the problem, right? So we just sketch out one, like, comes in, my ex-husband is trying to have me killed, and I need you to kill him. Or no, that's like an assassin plot. My ex-husband is tailing me, and I need you to, or someone's tailing me, I need you to figure out who. It's probably my ex-husband because we're in a divorce. Okay, so he does this. He figures out, I think she's lying to me. And he figures out, oh, you're being tailed because you actually did something bad, and I'm going to turn you in for it. And that would be your surprise ending. And that's an easy 5,000 words. And you can kind of have some sexual tension in there with the woman, and maybe one other character that's like the person tailing her. It turns out it's a federal agent who's investigating her for high crimes. It's like, get this person who's tailing me, and then if you have to, protect me, kill them, right? So she's trying to get you to kill like a federale or something, right? Really simple, that plot's been done a dozen times. But you can nail that out in 5,000 words because you have an intro scene. You can do it in first person, which means you can have the detective doing all the inner monologue for stuff. You have an action sequence where you're catching the person who's following her around, who's stalking her. And then you have maybe a 1 to 2 scene sequence where the detective learns the truth and then confronts her at the end and turns her into the police. Okay, really standard plot. Let's say we wanted to extend that. Let's attack from the other angle. We want to turn that into a full book. Well, we just add more characters and plots. So the hot blonde comes in. Somebody's stalking me. I need you to figure out who it is and put a stop to it if you can. Because I know you're a guy of grit who will step in and take action if necessary. Okay, so we're going to add a subplot. There's a romance with the hot blonde. Okay. That subplot will add to the length of the book, half the length of the book. All right, we just upped the length to 7,500 words. We've come up with a C story. The detective has a best friend. The best friend has also got a problem that the detective has to solve at the same time. Or the detective has another problem, and we can make a love triangle. He's having a conflict with his wife because they can't pay their mortgage. So he has a really strong impetus to take this job, and he's got to figure out how to solve the problem with the bank foreclosing on his house. Okay, A, B, C story. They all kind of go together like that. Now you're at 10 to 12,000 words. But the truth is that once we start adding in these elements, we really need to it starts to grow kind of exponentially. If you just put in those extra things, all of a sudden you'd be at 20,000 words. Because you'll have to have a scene where the detective is having a conflict with his wife and revealing the problem of the mortgage. You'll have to have a scene where he's maybe talking to the banker and trying to get enough time to pay the mortgage, right? To hype up that conflict. You need some scenes where he is talking to the blonde and she's seducing him maybe, and he has to come to he has a moral conflict over whether he's going to let himself be seduced by her, and his wife has been a real dick to him, so it's very tempting, and the audience might be really tempted. Here's this hot blonde, she likes him a lot, and his wife's a fat bitch, right? So we get some real temptation there. Now, to make it book length, we just add more obstacles between the beginning of the conflict and the end of the conflict for each one of those conflicts. So for him to have the romance, there has to be more obstacles. Turns out she has an ex-husband. That ex-husband's very dangerous. We need to neutralize that ex-husband. I'm married and I have to be able to get over rejecting my wife to be with her. This feeds back into the A plot. We need to figure out why this person that's tailing her, I don't think is actually the mafia. Is she involved with the mafia? I got to go talk to the crime boss. There's extra scenes there, right? My bank's is foreclosing on the house. I have to talk to the banker. I have to do something with the bank. I have to trick the bank, maybe. We're putting more obstacles in between that. The bank doesn't want to take my money. All right, I have to figure out how to get the bank to take my money, right? So you put more obstacles in there. Okay, for me to figure out who's tailing her, I have to go to more places. I have to go upstate. I have to follow this car into murky upstate New York and see what's going on up there. And maybe I run into a shopkeeper who has a problem, and that distracts me. And there's a shootout with somebody, but the shootout happens because somebody mistaked me for another guy, right? I guess I'm the detective at this point when I'm like hashing this out. Before you know it, you get out to 50,000 words easy, and you're at like a shadow novel length. And then, that best friend, maybe you have a best friend, you have a D story, another subplot. Best friend needs help too. And so you go ahead and you crank that up and you get stuff. Oh, here's something no, never mind. I was like, oh, is someone on Twitch? I think there's like one person on Twitch. If you're watching on Twitch, I love you. All right. So you just add more obstacles. Just add another obstacle to get there. And the benefit of adding obstacles is it ups the tension. Right? There's more obstacles to paying your mortgage. The tension of like, are we going to lose our house? Is he going to cheat on his wife? All that gets higher and higher. Maybe we get to the point where he's going to cheat on his wife. He's going to do it. But a detail suddenly comes to attention when she's like taking her bra off. And he runs out the door and jumps in the car and tells her, I have to fix this, and drives off. And then he figures out, the person who's tailing her is not the mafia. It's the federal government. And she's trying to get him to kill a federal agent and be the one who goes to jail or whatever. So she's kind of like double crossing. You come up with something cool like that. That's an easy 70. And you got to think most mystery novels are not 150,000 words. So you can get up to 100,000 words adding in all of those little scenes and all of those little conflicts. The way most fantasy authors get up over 100,000 words is just by adding in superfluous crap. It's the best way I could describe it now. Not so much obstacles to the plot, but just, well, here's a scene where the two characters talk about the world my D&D world that I world built. I'm not a fan of that. I think if you're going to add stuff to your book, it should be plot. That's what I really think. So both angles. If you have a longer story and you want to cut it down, cut the characters out. Get rid of the best friend. Get rid of the wife conflict. Fewer conflicts. Get rid of the whole my marriage is failing. You just cut it down to the basic conflict of I need to solve the problem for this woman. And you can just mention my mortgage was coming due and I really had to take this job. That's all the explanation you need for his motivation for taking a dangerous job. It's he just needs the money, right? We all need money. Adrian needs money. He gave me $10 for some reason, but he should. I'm going to find his PayPal and maybe give him back. I'll give him 20. Or when you publish your books, I'll buy them. It's all good stuff, right? Paying down debts. It's hard work, especially if you have credit card debt. I don't want to get on my debt high horse, but young people are frequent victims of usury. The sin of usury. And we have very little sympathy for you. Dumb young person took out a bunch of credit cards. It's credit card companies pretty irresponsible giving an 18-year-old a credit card. Same thing with student loans. Oh, you said you would pay this money. It's maybe you should take the L. Maybe you shouldn't be giving out $100,000 to an 18-year-old. Seems pretty stupid. I wouldn't give $100,000 to an 18-year-old. They only do it because they're guaranteed by the guns of the government to get the money back. Come hell or high water, unless you're dead. The only way that you can get out of a student loan is by dying. It's like usurer's paradise. And it is usury. If you don't know what usury is not excessive interest. People don't understand this because they've been miseducated intentionally, I believe. Not to get into my conspiracy theory thing. There's this idea that somehow the economy needs usury, and people have no idea what usury actually is. Usury is charging interest on a mutuum. Usury is charging interest on money on the use of money. Your mortgage is not usury because the interest is for the use of the house. Your car payment is not usury because the interest is for the use of the car. The loan is attached to a thing which you use. You're not using the money, you're using the thing, right? The bank buys the house for you, and then you slowly buy it from the bank, and you pay the bank rent. You pay them extra to use the house, which they don't get to use. You're the one who gets to use it. Obviously, you're paying for the use of the house. Okay. Versus a student loan is necessarily usury because you don't get a thing for it. You can't use money and have money. You can only have it and spend it. Money is not separate from its use. That's why usury is considered a sin in traditional thinking. We do this to young people all the time. Get a credit card, put it on the credit card. You can buy alcohol on your credit card. Okay, credit card company's like, pay us the money that you spent on alcohol. You're like, I don't have it. I bought booze with it. You want to repossess the booze? I peed it out. Can't repossess the booze. The money's gone. Can't repossess the money. You could repossess a car or a house. So if you can't pay your house payment, the bank gets your house. Sorry, that happens, but the bank put up the money for the house. So they get the house. And then you're square. That's the end of the debt. It's not like they get the house and your children. But with usury, it's something different. And I believe that companies really push it on young people so that they can maximize the amount of interest that they extract out of them. So I think young people are big time victims of interest. The big thing you hear about with financial stuff is people grow up, pay down your credit cards, and don't use them anymore. Maybe we're giving too many credit cards to young people. Maybe we're giving out way too big of student loans. I could talk about student loans forever, but anyway, I approve of people getting out of debt and not getting back into it. In my case, where was I? My isekai novel is the first book in a series that takes place in a large universe, so I should be good at it not ending. Yeah, just keep writing it, man. Blast them out. Being attached to characters rather than writers isn't new. People bought shadow pulps. That's a very good point. It's a great point. I guess I'm localizing my understanding to like the 1980s. It was like Michael Crichton, new Michael Crichton book, new Stephen King book, right? Or, maybe even further back, like new Poul Anderson book, rather than, like The Shadow and the Hardy Boys. Those are really good examples. They often didn't know who the writers really were. F.W. Dixon isn't a real person. Like Hardy Boys writers were they were all ghost writers. That's the way they did business back then. So, that's a really good point. It is nothing new. And in fact, I think it's a holdover from the comic book generation to the extent where like all marketing is attached to characters. Disney Star Wars is real because Disney paid money for it to be real, not, this is George Lucas's character, right? To be fair, the difference between the federal government and mafia is paperwork. I agree. We don't need to get into that, but yeah. Debt does stink. It sucks. I'm glad that I personally have no debt. It's a really, I'd made a lot of certain sacrifices in my life to not go into debt, and I don't know if all of them I'm okay with, but it's really good to not have, like, it changes your perspective about what you can do. If you're having to pay like a $500 student loan every month, then you have to be making a certain amount of money no matter what, which just limits your options. You can't take as many risks. So not having debt means you have more freedom. You have more freedom to take risks. So avoiding debt, if you can avoid it, and getting out of debt. And keep in mind, like, debt is so much more crippling when you're a young person than when you're old, even. Because when you're old, you tend to have more assets to figure out how to deal with debt. And when you're young, it's like even a small, like owing $500 on a credit card can be crippling if your income is low. Like, it'd be like an impossible task to pay it off because you're just living month to month. Like, how are you getting that extra $500? We kind of forget that. It's like that 22-year-old that took out all the student loans so he could be a lawyer, can't find a job as a lawyer. What does he do? He has to work somewhere, and he works for less money than what he thought he would work for, meaning he can't get married, he can't have kids, can't ever buy a house. He has to live in perpetual poverty basically forever to service the student debt. He can't ever go into like a debt that would advance him, like buying a home or taking out a business loan because he has so much other debt from the education stuff. It's a big problem. Anyway, let's get back to books because I don't need to go on to political stuff. I get that most conservatives do not see my perspective, but they should read more Thomas Aquinas and listen less to modern economic think tanks that don't think about ethics in a medieval way. The first objection Thomas Aquinas makes to usury is that you're charging somebody for something that doesn't exist, which is the use of money. There's no such thing as the use of money. You don't use money. You use a lawnmower, you spend money. When you spend the money, it's gone. It's like you don't use wine, is actually the metaphor he uses. You don't use wine, you drink wine. So if I loan you wine and I charge you interest on the wine, I'm charging you for the use of the wine. You can't use wine. It doesn't exist. It's something that doesn't exist. So you're basically you're defrauding someone when you charge them interest, charge them for the use of a thing which doesn't exist. It's like, I'm going to charge you the use of I'm going to charge you $50 to use my invisible frog. Can't do that. That's fraud, right? You're just lying to someone that there's an invisible frog they have to pay for when there's no such thing. That's actually the first argument against usury, and nobody uses it because they really like making money as a usurer, is my guess. But no one reads Aquinas. People need to read more Thomas Aquinas. If you want to read the Summa Theologica, it is free. I'm going to give you guys a link. There are many translations of the Summa Theologica or Theologiae, and I'm going to give you some. Actually, I could put it in every single. Boom. Does the Restream bot go to live streaming? Let's find out. Oh, it does. Awesome. Okay, you can read this. And we can find, I think it's in the second part. Nope. Maybe a third part. Usury. I don't need to argue about usury. St. Thomas Aquinas already did that. We'll just let the saint do the talking. I may gently and humbly clarify, but I don't think I can add or take away from Thomas Aquinas' arguments. And you can read it in Latin too if you want to. But medieval Latin, I'm going to tell you guys, if you're Latin students, medieval Latin is tough. It's way more technical than classical Latin, which is more about either poetry or just use. Whereas Latin was the lingua franca of the Middle Ages, and so it's what anybody who wanted to be extremely clear for everybody used was Latin. And so the point of scholasticism was to be like ironclad clear on every point you're making. So there's a lot of complex sentences where you may have to stop and think about like what every root and stem being used is trying to convey and what the function even of a sentence is. But Latin's perfect for that because you can, in that sentence, point to like very definite relationships between nouns and verbs without having to use a lot of words. But yeah, it's I remember in my Latin studies trying to read Aquinas, and I was like, whoa, I'm just like way out of my depth here. Like, what does this and this mean? It's like, okay, he used this really technical way to construct this argument because that's how Latin was. Latin was used in that way in the Middle Ages. Contrary to popular belief, Latin was not just like wasn't a dead language. So, the Latin wasn't performed in the tongue of the people is actually an objection that doesn't understand the languages of Europe or of the Middle Ages. So should be talking about books. I'm talking about Latin on the Writestream and history. but it's useful. I'm talking in English. I know there's at least one person in the chat from Eastern Europe, right? Great. We're using the lingua franca of today, which is English, but there was no nationalistic languages back in the Middle Ages. So if you went to Spain, what's modern day Spain, if you went to Iberia, you would find that you could travel between different towns and barely understand the people even one town over from the one that you were born at, let's say. Is that there was no Spanish and Portuguese. These were dialects that became sort of nationalized and condensed much later. In fact, there was, Catalonian Spanish, and there was Castilian Spanish, and there was Andalusian Spanish, and they maybe even spoke just different languages in Andalusia. They spoke Arabic or something in some places. There was Portuguese. All these things didn't, there were different dialects, like even one town over. I was trying to remember the number, but if you read about the oil languages in France, you think, oh, France, everyone spoke French. No, almost nobody actually spoke French, like formal French. People spoke these other languages, which were dialectically maybe kind of like French, or maybe very far away, like Britain, right? In Brittany, they spoke a Celtic dialect that had nothing to do with French, and you couldn't understand any part of it. It's almost a dead language now, and it's only preserved by like a preservation society. Okay, the Normans probably spoke some version of Norse, not even French, right? So even going one town over, you maybe wouldn't understand the people that were there. So why was the Mass performed in Latin? Is because Latin was actually the common tongue of the former Roman Empire. It was the language that most people could understand, and even if you were completely illiterate, you could be taught enough Latin to understand what was being said in the Mass. Like you could have a minimal amount of catechesis to know what the words of the Mass meant. How they said Father, Son, Holy Spirit in Latin, and all those what the different parts of the Mass were. You were raised in those waters. You swam in them. You understood those parts to it. So the idea that like the Catholic Church was not letting people translate the Bible. Think about translating the Bible to the 100 different languages in France. Why would the Catholic Church want to keep the Bible in Latin? Because Latin was the lingua franca, and you could mistranslate things. If you were translating them into a dialect in one region of France, say Burgundy, and then you had that Bible in another region of France, it could have slightly different meaning, different shades of meaning, or the person may not be able to understand it. Plus, it would actually be a heroic undertaking to try to translate the Bible into every single tongue in Europe in, say, the 13th century. Where everybody spoke very different dialects, and there were only so many scribes to go around. There was no printing press. There weren't enough scholars to be translating a giant book called the Bible into a bunch of little tiny local dialects. You just didn't do it. It wasn't on the radar. So the idea that, oh yeah, the Bible should be in the vernacular. There was no vernacular. Like the vernacular meant what people spoke in the town you were in. People might have spoken a different dialect one town over. It's weird to think about, but it's true. Think of all the different accents in England that are just left over from that. There's people that live in England and are like, I can't understand people from East London. It's like, well, you're not the only one. It's hard to understand like that East London Cockney accent sometimes, or you get someone who's really like Welsh and they have an accent. There's still Welsh as a language that's spoken. Should the Catholic Church have translated the Bible into Welsh? I don't know. There are some Scottish people today that I can barely understand due to their accents. Count Dankula, for example. Oh, fun thing. Thank you, Hardwick. Just reminded of something so fun. We're going to talk about it on the stream. There is a Scots edition of Harry Potter. And I'm going to find it really quick. Scots edition. Yes, it exists. Here it is. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone Scots edition. I'm going to see if I can take a look inside. I don't think I can. I don't think I can look inside it. Oh, man. You're like, Scots edition, what the hell are you talking about? This is one of the most bizarre translations. Okay, is there a picture? Okay, there's a picture. No, that's not it. All right, I'm gonna find it. Okay, this is great. Okay, let me find it. All right, here we go. Here we go, gents. The laddie what lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, a number 4 private loan, were proud to say that they were gay normal. Thank you very much. They were the least folk you would jealous would be tangled up with anything uncle or weird, because they just didn't have they didn't have with hivers like yon. Mr. Dursley was hide bummer. It's like, it's incomprehensible. It's just like a so you guys maybe have heard the movie Train Spotting. I'm gonna look up the first. I'm gonna look up the Train Spotting first page, and you'll get what I'm talking about. The Train Spotting novel. Irving Welsh, right? He's the one who wrote it. Okay, can we look inside it? We gotta find a version where we can look inside. Kindle. Let's get the Kindle preview going, if I can. Man, no, I can't. Man, but that one's written in like a Scottish dialect. Hold on, where's my streaming software? Yes, okay. So that's what it looks. Chapter 9. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, a number 4 private loan, were proud to say that they were gay normal. Thank you very much. They were the last folk you would jealous with be tangled up with anything uncle or weird, because they just didn't have with hivers like yon. I don't even know what that says, so I'm probably saying it wrong because I don't live in rural Scotland, right? You just kind of copy, meet Scottish people and start copying their accent. I had a friend who's Scottish and actually works for the U.S. State Department. He doesn't have an accent that's this thick. He was a muckle, beefy bucket man with a stumpy wee craggy, although he did have a gay muckle mouser. Mrs. Dursley was a skinny malinky, blonde-headed woman whose craggy was just about twice as long as her fox, which was alpha howdy as she spit say muckle time kicking over garden fences, nibbing at the neighbours. The Dursleys had a wee son called Dudley, and to them there was nigh a brawler laddie in the whole world. world. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but as well as anything, they had a secret, and their worst fear was that somebody would nib it out. Anyway. So this is real, right? This is a real thing. There's a moose around the hoose. It's real. I kind of want to get it because it's just, it's definitely one of the craziest. It's one of the craziest. Hecklepick! Corby Cluck! Brocklehurst Mandy. Anyway, that's pretty funny, right? I hope you guys are not the only one. I hope I'm not the only one entertained by this. It's all blurry. All right. Anyway, yes, the Scots version of this. But that's what it would be like traveling from like England to like another, like northern England to like Scotland. You'd be like, what? I can't understand anything you're saying. I've heard you perform various working class or Cockney type English accents. Can you do the received pronunciation as well? Received pronunciation, yeah. Received pronunciation is just neutral pronunciation. Soft R's, pretty neutral. Slightly different, you say advertisement. Advertisement. If you wanted to be a more posh, you kind of have a plum in your mouth. Advertisement. So yeah, received pronunciation is good to practice because it's just like the neutral. It's just the neutral. It's where you kind of start and then you add things to it. Miss Gardner, you get kind of country accents where you start hitting those hard R's. I mean, the first thing kids will do when they want to do an English accent is take the R out. And that's not a bad place to start, but there's more to it than that. It's really that the R is kind of softly in there. And sometimes you add in R's where they don't belong. So if you say America is, you say America is. America is a great place to be. America is a large country. America is. I picked this up listening to Lemmy. I'm like, Lemmy's dropping R's in weird places. I'm like listening to interviews with him, listening to him sing. America. America? What's America? America. But he's saying another word afterwards. So rather than doing a glottal stop, America is, he does America is. It just kind of, the R kind of flicks between those words. There's a lot of subtlety to trying to do accents, and I'm not a great actor in that regard. You know, other people are going to be way better at it than I am. I have some theater background. That's it. I'm not a theater kid. Yeah. Stating the story via plot. Okay, yes. Let's get back to that. Have you seen My Fair Lady? They go over the H thing in it. My Fair Lady. I'm getting married in the morning. Is that song from it? Ding dong, the bells are gonna chime. Take out the stopper, make it a whopper, but get me to the church on time. Isn't that My Fair Lady? It's been a long time. It's fun though. All right. So yeah, if you're wanting to submit, take a look at the submission requirements of whatever magazine you're looking to submit to. Take a look at the length requirements for any agent for what they want and what publishers want to publish. And extend your story to meet that or cut it down to meet that before you write it by changing the amount of plot, the number of characters, and the number of obstacles between the beginning of the conflict and its resolution. And you'll be able to, with some experience, start writing books that are within the length that you enjoy writing. Let's do a little bit of live writing because I'm kind of wanting to do this. So I got about 30 more minutes. Let's take a look at the book we were writing before and see how that's going. Where is it? I think the title of the working document right now is I Walk Down the Gallery. Now I came up with some good twists that are going to be hard to execute, but I like to surprise people even as I'm writing. So we're gonna try to do that. Let me get this kind of set up properly on the other monitor here, so we can see what the heck we're doing. Do I have another one? I guess this will do. I might size this. Let's size this up a little bit. So yeah, there we go. So the words are a little easier to see on the screen. All right. Okay, this should be good. Now it should be big enough for people to see what I'm doing here. And I'll keep the chat up. Let me find the place to put the chat. Here's my Restream chat. Pop that up. We'll do that up here. So now I should be able to see at least something of what y'all are saying. I'd love it if somebody commented on another platform, but I got a comment on Twitter from Pinkerton's Ghost. A story should be as long as it needs. Yeah, but it may need to be a certain length to get published. And you may want to make it longer or shorter. So part of being a professional is know how to write that. Oh, I didn't talk about screenplays. So before I hop into this, let's talk briefly about screenplays. Screenplays are really easy. You use Final Draft software. 1 page equals 1 minute of screen time, roughly. Most genre films that you're going to write need to be 105 to 120 pages long tops. 105 is going to be about a 100-minute movie. So 100 pages, 100 minutes. Teleplays, same idea. You're going to write, there's two big formats, NBC and CBS. NBC format has 2 commercial breaks. CBS format has 1 commercial break. NBC format, if you buy Final Draft, they have both of these formats because they're formatted slightly differently. Roughly the same. The pages come out a little bit longer in the teleplay because it's closer to like the dramatic tradition. Okay. When you're writing a play, it's not going to work out that way. Okay. When you're writing a play is going to be a little bit different. Play maybe needs to be an hour. There's different lengths of plays, right? It needs to be an hour, then intermission hour. So two hours. That usually is going to be like a 100-page play. It's going to run out to about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. But it just depends on how you stage it and how you run things. So plays tend to be a little bit more condensed than screenplays, but if you are running on an 8.5 by 11 and you're using like an actual script for a play, it's going to roughly be the same. One page is about a minute of acting time on stage. So your 3-hour play needs to be 150 pages long with that full format. A lot of times we read plays like in this format, and that's not, you're like, oh, this is like a 120-page play. It's like it actually would only be about 2 hours. An hour and an intermission, another hour, or even less than that, 90 minutes. So anyway, that's screenplays. You have to stick to a really tight format if you're going to try to write and sell a screenplay. If you're shooting the movie yourself, then anything goes. You can make it as long or as short as you want. But if you're trying to get it shot in standard movie formats, which are going to be 90 to 120 minutes, then you need to stick to the actual formats that are there. My advice, if you want to get into screenplay writing, is just to get the Final Draft software. That'll take care of all the formatting for you, and use that to determine how long the script needs to be and what you need to cut from there to get it to whatever length you need to be. Same thing with the teleplay. It has templates for all of that crap built into it. So yes, that's the industry standard for good reason. Final Draft software, and that's what you should buy and use. Okay. So anyway, that's all that there is about screenplays. Let's live write a little bit. Boom. Here I am. Okay. So we're going to, I sketched out some scenes here. Right. Let's do scene 2. Let's hop up here. We're going to do scene 2. We're going to make it a heading. Okay. So now we can just click to it and do it. We'll get this guy's name. We didn't drop it. Or maybe we did. It's Xander, right? So we're still doing this in the first person, which is a little weird. Like, I don't usually write fantasy in the first person, but I guess I'm going to for this one. I'm going to write in the first person. All right. So we're going to write a scene where I already wrote it down. I think I did it in the notes, the places. Yeah. All right. We're going to keep it short here. Notice I'm not adding a lot of extra characters in. This story would probably be, I'm going to guess, 20,000 words. This is about like the kind of plot I would put in a 20,000 word book. And it would like hit all those points. We have a protagonist, we have an antagonist, we have his love interest, and we have a couple of other characters we meet on the way. So I'm actually going to write a scene where he is on a barge being dragged up the river from from Solborg to Strandam. All right, let's do it. I huddled against the boathouse on the barge. A rough shack-like structure protruding from the deck like a great rotting wart. I held my cloak tightly around my body. Squeezing out any chill from the perpetual westerly wind we worked against. We're kind of just setting the scene. You know, the river rushed under me, bubbling and gurgling. I'm in the opposite direction from the wind. And I couldn't help but feel twisted between those two extremes. Like a ring of smoke caught between the draft of the stove and the breath of the smoker. The oxen necessary for the return journey to Solborg stirred and the barge rocked. The captain, an old toothless man, who was old at 40. Gives you an idea, right? We don't need to like tell like, oh, he had just like one thing. He had toothless, and he's old at 40. So you get an idea, like a guy who like lives hard. Cried and griped. So I'm talking about the dialects. And whipped the oxen. Who appeared unfazed. With a short thong. One gave a moo. But they looked disinclined. To respond to the whip. As if from my shadowy what's the word? I don't think reclination's a word, but I'm writing it. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm writing it down. The old boatman ignored me. Cursed a few more. All right, back inside this hovel of a boathouse. Give him some clues as to when it is. Autumn sky. And back. The dagger. What was his name? Not Murdrawl. If it's Murdrawl, we have to Murdrag. I may change that because it sounds too much like Murdrawl from Robert Jordan. Murdrag. It's Ebon Blade. Drank the sun like a void. Not even the sheen, you know, the sheen of a black horseshoe. We don't need to say black horseshoe. We can just say horseshoe. It was the senses of my birth and my profession told me as I ran my fingers along along a groove in the fuller. Am I using fuller right? We'll find out later. Can see this. Make sure. Yes. Okay. Old Tales. Yeah, I added an H. I'm gonna keep the H. I think it's cool. Brr. Like a. I like that. Murdrag. I'm gonna leave the H. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's too much like Murdrawl. No, we'll find out. All right, got 50 more minutes. Let's see. Let's see if we can write 500 words. We'll do a little whoop. An M dash. Alt 0151. That's how you write an M dash. Here you go. Attuned to a single living person. To cut. I'm going to add that mer drag. Since mer drag had a heart. It's the former. What's his name? We're going to introduce his name. Ruland. Tyrant. Cut out his heart. Procedure did before. Get it dark. Procedure I had done before. I don't know if I'm using accoutrements right. I think I am. There you go. Beloved Tirilla. There was Murdrag's great. I need a good word here. Not scrupulousness. Just writing backstory. Now let's wax poetic about Tarilla. Both perpetual. She was beauty defined. A little bit of my philosophy. We'll do a little bit of Platonism here. Yeah. Should be fun. All right. Like the rings she wore, the chains, her neck, holding that precious locket. That her graceful fingers often found absent-mindedly. She's northern, so we're doing that blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Eyes. Blue. Rare, like sapphires, but deep, like the winter ocean. Deep, like the winter ocean. Yeah. Then there was the color. Oh, it's screaming. They're not screaming stars. I mean, the first stars flashing to life. In Western purple. Yeah. So yeah, we just focus on her eyes and her hair. We don't really need to say that much. Obviously her neck, you know, it's like, what else you want to say about her? To gaze at her slender body. Here, thick. Yeah. What's the word? Narrow and definite. Paint stroke is 2 words. Okay. Paint stroke is 2 words. The tragedy. See, I'm trying to find the right words here. You gotta like juice it, right? Show like how into this woman he is. My great tragedy. Okay, doll. You laying against the door, pup? Cute pup. All right. My great tragedy was that I knew in full detail there. Both view ever be denied. Anything to preserve her. There we go. How much is that? We're at 8 o'clock on the dot. That'd be perfect. Let's see how much we wrote. Oh, 700 words. Should write 1,000. Let's close this scene out. Where are we going to? We are going to Strandham. Random. The unpleasantness of my appointed task. Silently I cursed the king. My own ugly made-up tongue. This is the toothless man cursed his bored oxen. Like his guttural, what's the word? Gutturance. Like his guttural. Faint grim. That's like God of Death. All right, so we hyped up the conflict a little bit. Scene 3. Let's hop down here to notes before we leave. So we can actually make this. You can select this, select heading and content. Oh, about 800 words. That's fine for the scene. I don't want to overdo it, right? Describe the woman, why, you know, basically she's super beautiful and he loves her. And that's enough for this. So this is going to be scene, we'll do all these down here. So this will actually be scene 3. 4. So he's going to arrive and he starts to use persuasion to get people to tell him where the target is. So that's going to be scene number 3. We'll do that at the next live write, probably on Saturday. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Appreciate everybody hanging out with me. I will post the results of this live write on the, what is it? The Patreon feed and the Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi. You tell me if it's Ko-Fi or Ko-Fi. I'll post it there too. For anybody that wants to sub on Ko-Fi or wants to buy things from me there or on Patreon. So it's all good. So I'll post it on the Patreon and that'll be a little extra benefit for people who are there. So anyway, guys, I appreciate it. Y'all have a good rest of your evening and I'll see you all on Saturday probably. Have a Merry Christmas. It's coming on Monday. And yeah, have a Merry Christmas. And I'll see you next week or Saturday. And then next week for a Writestream on Wednesday. I'll probably do a music stream on Saturday too, because I think that was pretty fun. Not popular, but you never know. There might cultivate a different audience with that. And that'll be fun. So is Ko-Fi a pun on coffee? Yes, it is. So it's a pun on coffee. Let me link the Ko-fi page. Ko-fi? I don't know. But, you know, it's another subscription option. It's another option to buy things from me. So I think on my thing it says 19 books. I think I've written actually more than that. I couldn't fit all the books into the banner. I was like, I've written too much crap over the years. How many books have you written? I'm like, oh man, I gotta think about it. It's like asking me how many guitars I have. It's like, dude, don't ask me that. I don't know what it is. It's too many, okay? Got too many guitars and too many guns. Good progress. Thanks, David. Bye, everybody. And we'll finish the book, and then I'll publish it on stream too. That'll be fun. And I'll do everything. We'll do the whole thing. We'll draft it. We'll edit it. You know, we could even I'll come up with maybe something with maybe we can get Brian on to live edit it and pay him to live edit it. And it'll be a fun little business thing. And then, then we'll design a cover and we'll publish it. And it'll be really fun. So this will be a fun little project for the first half of 2024, I think. The first couple months. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day. And see you on Saturday, probably about 2 Central. Maybe let's do 3 Central. Probably 3 Central. It should be 1 in the afternoon Pacific. Same old bat time and channel. Have a great one. And I appreciate the super chats, guys. I really do.